Thank you. Hi, hello, everyone. My name is Fabiola Cáceres. I am the Senior Coordinator for Educational Programs for GreenThumb. Everything that are workshops or trainings, I am the point person. You probably received my many emails in the last week, so you know how to reach me if you're interested in being a part of these workshops or trainings. Thank you very much for being here tonight, and I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Mahira.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mahira. I'm a community engagement coordinator with GreenThumb. And I'll just give you guys a little background on GreenThumb if you aren't aware. I know we have a group of gardeners here, so this might be redundant information. But one thing I do want to emphasize is that GreenThumb was created in response to the fiscal crisis of the 1970s to support the work that community gardeners were already doing in their communities. They were taking abandoned lots and transforming them into spaces for food sovereignty, for land justice. And so, as we continue through the workshop, I just want to reiterate that our mission still stands the same. We are here to support the work of the community. As an engagement coordinator, I work particularly with gardens in Bushwick, in Cypress Hills. So if anyone is in those areas and interested in learning how to join a garden, please feel free to reach out. I'll leave my email in the chat. Thank you guys.
Hello, everybody. I am DK Kennard, and I am the Director of Community Engagement at the New York Restoration Project. Our acronym is NYRP. We are a 30-year green space organization dedicated to environmental stewardship, education, and urban agriculture. We have over 50 gardens in the five-borough area, as well as over 350 gardens for the city gardens that are a part of our garden network. We are so excited to have partnered with GreenThumb for a 5-part climate change virtual series focusing very specifically on urban gardeners and climate change. We started out our series in September where we talked about mobilizing community gardens as climate hubs for education around climate change, climate discussion, and more. We transitioned to talk about ways that the climate is impacting the elements and how these elements are impacting us as gardeners in our gardens. We talked about specifically our waterways, our water systems, and the importance of wetlands as a part of the water system and community garden conversation. We were joined by organization Seaweed City, which does tremendous, amazing education around kelp farming and how kelp is being used for soil health. We also talked about water systems, the history of water systems as essential to not only just agriculture and just human health, but as capital passageways for commerce and economy. We transitioned to talk about climate impact on our mental and physical holistic health by way of climate grief. We talked about climate grief terms and definitions and why and how we're impacted by just the changing elements of the environment. We took a little break and then we came back and we talked about climate's impact on pollinators and what we can do to sustainably create pollinator spaces that not only help our health and wellness, but help our animal allies and our community gardens. For this final conclusion of our 5-part series, we are so excited to welcome Zoë from Bronx Green-Up, who is going to talk about a topic that is very dear to me because it's actually how I got my start in urban agriculture with my mom, creating a garden at home with our houseplants. Zoë is a citywide noted educator in an array of topics, and we are so happy that she made the time to come here and speak with us about the impact of climate change on houseplants. I want to say once again, for those who are just joining us, that this video is being recorded and it will be shared on the GreenThumb and NYRP YouTube pages. And you're more than welcome to contact Zoë to see where it will be put up for Bronx Green Up. We know that you could have been anywhere in the city tonight. We thank you for joining us. And without further ado, Zoe, take it away.
Thank you, Dom. Thank you very much, DK. So welcome everyone, and thank you for being here on this wintry Wednesday night. So as DK said, I'm Zoë Arcidiacono, and I'm the Outreach and Education Coordinator at the New York Botanical Garden in the department Bronx Green-Up. And we were founded in 1988, sort of in the lieu of Green Thumb and Green Gorillas, to work with community gardeners in the Bronx. So we have wonderful programs. We offer, this is the team in the picture here. We offer free horticulture classes to community gardeners throughout the city. And we arrange and organize volunteer work days that are educational throughout community gardens and farms in the Bronx. So if you want to learn more, and I'll have this information at the end too, you can sign up to get our newsletter. There's a QR code and a link because it would be great to have all of you as students and volunteers. Tonight, we're going to talk about houseplants, and we're going to touch upon, I'm going to talk about a little bit about climate change and how it impacts the plants inside our homes and how the plants themselves are, where they come from, and how they make their way to our homes, how climate change has impacted them as well. So it's all intertwined. So we're gonna hope, and I'd love it if you could all participate and for this to be more of a conversation. I'm assuming you all have houseplants, or most of you anyway, are interested. So it would be more fun if we have it as a conversation as opposed to me lecturing at you for an hour and a half.
Zoe, I would love for our community members. We are so active in the chat, y'all. Shout out in the chat if you are growing houseplants. Bonus points if you can name at least 2 houseplants that you're growing. If you are not growing houseplants, we always like to know where our community members are coming from. I'm a proud farmer at New Roots Community Farm in the Bronx. Shout out to New Roots in Queens and in the Bronx. So if you are not growing houseplants, shout out and let us know in the chat where you're gardening.
So yeah, I'm a community gardener too, but yes, I love growing plants in my home, and I always have. So we're going to talk about houseplants. What are they? Where are they from? And what do they need to thrive? Those are like the basics. And then we're going to talk a little bit about climate change and how it impacts the climate in our homes, which impacts the plants. And yeah, so let's get to it. So climate change. I would love it. You know, I have a definition here of climate. So, and I think climate is in different zones on our planet: equatorial, you know, on the equator, tropical, temperate, and polar. And then we have climate and climate change. It's the long-term shift in Earth's average temperature and weather conditions. It's very basic. So I would like to hear from all of you. Have you noticed any changes in the climate in New York? And have you noticed how it's impacted your house plants or your community garden plants? I'll say, we've noticed that this has been an especially cold and snowy winter. Our winters have been, I think, coming a little later. I think the seasons I've noticed are starting to shift a bit. Like fall starts maybe in October now. We have longer winters, so we have our heaters on, and it can get awfully dry in our apartments, homes. I've noticed things like that.
We have a comment in the chat that this winter in particular has been a very cold winter. I definitely have to second that. We have a second comment that the air has been very dry. I know we have had those conversations as well. I want to add that for me, it seems like it's getting darker much earlier. And to me, it's an intense dark. I don't know if it's my imagination, but it's a darkness that I personally haven't experienced. I don't think ever, or at least not in a very long time. I'm coming from northern Manhattan, and I've noticed often that I'm turning lights on in my house as early as 3:50, 4 o'clock, versus the traditional maybe 5:15, 5:30.
Anyone else noticing anything?
So far, that's it.
Okay, great. Well, I will also just say before I go forward that I mention the climate zones because I think it's important to consider where our plants come from, in which climate zone, where in the world, and then to, to understand your house plant and where it comes from will help you understand what it needs and adjust to what's going on in your home. The climate that the microclimate of your home. So we'll get into it. Before we do though, one more question to get you all thinking, like houseplants, what is it? That's not it's a definition or something we've created within the last, couple hundred years, maybe. That's being generous. So we have in this image here, a popular houseplant. It can be called a Swiss cheese plant or Monstera deliciosa. Why is this a houseplant? Like how do you think we define houseplant? Anyone wants to raise their hand?
While we're thinking of that houseplant answer, I do want to uplift that community members shared one of the climate change elements that they're noticing is that leaves are turning yellow, possibly faster and sooner.
Mhm.
And then another community member uplifted that they're having to water their houseplants during winter more often
Mhm.
because furnaces, and I can
Mhm.
attest to probably radiators as well, are running hotter and longer.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And then we also have a community member commenting that a houseplant is anything we grow indoors.
Exactly. Christina, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say that a house plant is just a piece of the outside that we bring indoors.
Exactly. Exactly. And I just like to think of that because it's like, why do we bring the plants inside that we do? And I will just use an example of we consider the history of houseplants to have started in the 19th century in England. Of course, it was elsewhere, but that's where it starts to kind of be studied, and it would happen in a more, I don't know, more regular way, perhaps. So the plants people brought in then, and they're large. They weren't all large. They're in their drafty, colder homes. They had a fireplace, if that. Were plants that had to be cold hardy for the winters, right? And now the plants we can bring in are much more varied, like the Monstera deliciosa, and a lot of our plants come from desert regions and from tropical regions. So those are like two main climate zones where we can bring our plants inside. And it's just kind of special to think about. It's because we have windows that aren't so drafty, and we do have heating and air conditioning. That's what a houseplant is. And so why do we want houseplants? It seems obvious, but it's fun to discuss. DK mentioned that her mom had all the plants inside to make the air nice and fresh, and they do that. I like them because they're beautiful, and I think that looking at them and watering them in the morning or when they need it is very grounding. Makes me very present. I really enjoy that.
Judy in the chat says that we also have houseplants for color.
Yep. Color's beautiful. I do think that they can relieve stress and improve sleep. There's been studies that it can release like endorphins or whatever the chemicals in your brains are that make you happy. They add moisture to the air. And they clean the air, although the American Lung Society, some people debate how much they clean the air. I think the air in my apartment is cleaner, so that's all that matters. And I'm sure we all are here and we think they're beautiful. We just enjoy them.
I also want to uplift that they're a nice alternative for community members who might be allergic to pets.
Allergic to cats?
Pets. Mhm.
Pets, yep. So here are some common houseplants. Like I just showed the picture in the slide that said, what are houseplants? That's this plant on the left, the Monstera deliciosa. Very common. It's in the family called philodendron, which translates from the Greek to meaning tree loving. And as you can see here, it's a vine and it's climbing up a tree. I think that's how it got its name. And there are many kinds of philodendrons that make easy and great houseplants. So I'm sharing it here. And then the image in the center is a pothos, which is another very, very common houseplant. They sell them at grocery stores and bodegas as well as plant stores. And there are many varieties. But when we see them here, they are native, the philodendrons and Monstera deliciosa in particular is native to southern Mexico, Panama, and that part of the world. Whereas the pothos is native to Southeast Asia, Malaysia, that area, the world. So, but similar climate conditions, like warm, very humid. They grow. One thing they have in common is that makes them great plants for our apartments is they grow under the canopy. If you picture a rainforest, there's like the big trees and then all of the vines and things that grow underneath it. So it's a great plant to have inside, and it does well in low filtered light because that's what they grow in there. Of course, when you see them in the wild, they're much bigger. We can, the Monstera deliciosa is named that because it produces this fruit that you see here, this like oblong looking thing. It's a fruit that we can't get here, but it's described to taste a little bit like, it sounds like fruit punch to me. It's a little bit like banana, a little bit like guava and mango, like all combined. It sounds delicious. Hence deliciosa. And the pothos even gets these large leaves, like they're the size of our hand or our palm here. But look at them here. There is the size like at least a foot long, and they even have the fenestrations, which are the holes in the leaves, which were adapted so the plant can grow and move in wind and rain and stuff. Yeah. And sometimes we get them here. Does someone want to say something? Okay. So tropical plants. Philodendrons, pothos, very common ones, and they come in many different varieties. What's great about them is they require indirect and low light. And we'll talk about light into a little more detail in a little bit. Some do well with low humidity, whereas others need more. Because if you think about it, when you understand where they're from, it's very moist there, right? It's a rainforest. There's like water hanging in the air. And they do best in soil that can hold some moisture, but not too wet. So if you think of it, it's rainforests, they get rain pretty much like every day. So it's having water that you would water fairly often, and you want the water to go through the soil rather quickly. But that is just something I like to think of, holding on to that image in that conditions as best you can while you're picking your soil, and we'll talk a little more about this, where you're placing it in lighting and when you're considering its water needs. Here are some more houseplants in a different climate that are a very common houseplant category. It says it here, so they're succulents. And succulents include cacti and euphorbias, which are often, euphorbias are labeled cacti and they look really similar. The difference, they evolved differently. They're not related, but they evolved in similar conditions in deserts. So they look sort of similar, but they're not related. Kind of interesting. So euphorbias are from Africa and cacti are from the Americas. Well, fun fact. These are succulents in a part of the world that has 40% of the largest amount of succulents and a great variety. And it's the Karoo Desert in South Africa and Namibia. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when it comes to climate change and things that have been happening since the pandemic that is not great for the plants. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to take care of them. So desert plants, they're also commonly found in homes. As you can see, all these little pots, they just do really well. And they're so beautiful. They have these sort of sculptural kind of shapes. I think of them as very, very cool looking that way. And they're found in arid desert parts of the world. They talk a little bit here about succulents are not a taxonomic family, but they describe the plants that store water in their leaves, stems, or roots. So low humidity, heaters on, it works. They need sun. And they grow well in a sandy loam soil that drains well. If you plant these in a moister soil, they're going to get root rot and die because they're a desert plant and it doesn't rain that often. And the soil in deserts, if you've been into one, it's rockier and sandier. And so I just think that thinking of those conditions of both types of plants that I've just described, which are very commonly sold, if you were to use the same houseplant soil mix, they wouldn't all thrive. And that's what we want our houseplants to do. So often people think, oh, I don't have a green thumb, I have a black thumb, every plant I buy dies. But I don't believe in people having black thumbs. I think it comes to practice and understanding your plants and knowing how to, as one of my work colleagues said, you just have to listen to them. And they don't speak in words, but they let you know if you look at them how they're doing. So you want, like I say, I can't stress it enough. Consider where the plant comes from, and you'll get a lot of information to understanding and listen to your plant. You can find out where it's from there's books, you can Google it. I mean, it's not, there's so many resources. You can look at the leaves for clues, which I'll get to in a moment. And then when you're choosing it, you want to know what kind of lighting your apartment has. And one thing I've noticed when I do this class is I ask people, which direction is the light coming from in the windows in your home? And very few people know. I think I consider it because I lived in a really dark apartment in my early 20s, and it was kind of depressing. So I've always paid really close attention to that afterwards. I was like, I never want to live where I think I need to bring my umbrella out every day. So that's one reason. And you just really need to pay attention to where the sun is rising and setting in relationship to your apartment, and then you can figure it out. Because if you have a plant that needs a lot of light and you have a northern exposure, you don't have a black thumb, you just have a mismatch of conditions and plants.
As soon as you said that, a pun came into my head regarding this next question. It's corny, but I'm gonna share it anyway.
Do it.
We love farm jokes. So can you please shed some light on how Sansevieria is categorized?
Sansevieria, I think that's a cactus plant, correct? So Sansevieria, that's a great question. It's a cacti. It grows a lot in the Caribbean. I believe it originates also from Africa. It's interesting. I'm researching how plants got where they got, but I can't speak to that right yet. But it's fascinating because they are all got around the planet. But Sansevieria is a cacti. So people think, oh, this plant can grow in low light, and it can survive in low light. And so it's a very common house plant and office plant. But it does need some light and does better in some light, to be honest. And it does need to be watered. I would say every 2 weeks, but when I get to watering, I'll talk about it's good to have a sense of a schedule, but also pay attention and not be like a robot about it. So anyway, getting back to, will you be able to provide enough humidity? There are some plants that without the humidity, they just shrivel up and die. And I've had that happen a few times. And I know I've decided There are things I'll do in my apartment to increase humidity, but I'm not going to personally get a lot of humidifiers. I bought a humidifier once for a plant. It wasn't enough. And I said, you know what? That's it. But other people will do that and have many humidifiers. But if you know, and it depends on what you want to invest in and how you want to modify your environment. And humidity, I've had some plants that thrive in the summer, and the minute the fall comes and the windows are open, the air dries up, they just shrivel up. So something to think about. I'll also consider that if you do have space in your bathroom, that's a good place to put plants that need humidity, because it's usually more humid in there from taking showers and the wetness and all that kind of stuff. And if you need more information, picture this and plantnet.com are apps, if you have a phone, that identify plants with a picture. And then I have an online resource here as well. I also can include that in the back, but you can look up the plant. Before I buy plants now, I used to be more impulsive. I just thought it was pretty, I'd get it. I look it up first, and I consider my apartment or my workspace, because I also have plants here, and how they'll do. So I just can't stress that enough. Another, and here's the Sansevieria on the top here as a tip of the snake plant, is the plant leaves. If you don't know and you don't have your phone on you or you don't have the app, they can indicate how to care for the plant. So if a leaf is, like if you think of a succulent or even the snake plant, their leaves are thicker and they're waxier. They hold, even begonias, they hold on to moisture more. They have evolved to just be water sufficient. They hold on to it. Like a camel has a hump to hold on to water, like these plants were developed for that. So thick leaf, shiny leaves, it can hold water, don't need to water as often. And then the thinner leaf plants, a philodendron on the bottom, those like green velvety leaves. So like the Monstera deliciosa, actually these are both different types of philodendron. They are sold everywhere. They kind of look like a pothos, and they do have similar growing conditions. They need to be watered more often. And they also can do well in low light, hence they are sold everywhere in the city. Okay, so lighting. Once you know where your windows are facing, you can understand your light. So if you have south facing windows, that is the brightest, most intense light. Also consider, are there trees outside your window, or do you have any buildings blocking your windows? Not just the direction, but that's something to consider too. West is the second warmest, hottest light. It's the sunset light. The windows that are facing east, which is both my workspace and my apartment, I grow different plants than when I had Western exposure. Just because it's a softer light in the morning. I don't know how else to describe it. It's a little less bright. And then if your apartment faces north, it's hard to grow plants inside. And then you can get some grow lights is my suggestion. But there is a couple things you can grow, like a ZZ plant, but it's harder. It's harder. Another thing to consider is how the light changes with the seasons. So when we go into like the winter equinox, the sun is lower on the horizon. The planet is facing further away from the sun. So I don't know if you notice, like where the sun comes up and goes down, and it shifts, and the light comes up later. Our days are shorter. I mean, we all notice this, but it's really, the plants notice it too. So they feel and absorb less light through the windows in the winter than in the summer or spring. And they slow down. I don't know if my plants put out less leaves. They just sort of chill out during the winter. And that's okay. So in the winter, you don't want to feed your plants food, because they need to keep all their energy in their roots. And you could slow down on watering them because they're growing more slowly. However, you want to consider, are we having a really cold winter, and how much heat and dryness is that producing inside our homes? So that's something, because if you're getting a lot of heat and your home is really dry, then you are going to want to water it a little more. In fact, I water some of my succulents that I have near a radiator more in the winter than I do in the summer, which is sort of counterintuitive. That's why I don't really believe in following these like charts you can get in books or on the computer because online, because they don't take all those changes into consideration. And then that is something to think about with climate change, like the light and the heat and how we're responding to heating and cooling our interiors based on it. Our summers are also really hot now. So I don't like using air conditioning, but I do. And I do it more often. And that does affect plants. I'm talking more about winter right now, but it is how climate change impacts our apartments. Or I say apartments, some of you might live in homes. I use my air conditioner more because July and August are really, really hot now. And yeah, so that's something to consider. Another thing is the temperature of your apartment near windows, like microclimates. That's something to consider too. So
Zoe,
I was
two
talking about,
things before you continue on. One, we have a question in the chat
okay,
that
great.
asks, is it a good idea to change the area that our plants are in, or perhaps even rotate where they are so that they can receive more lighting? And then
Yes.
also, can you please just share a little bit more for those who might not be aware? What is the concept of microclimates?
Okay, perfect. The number one, yes, move your plants. I did so today, and it answers both your questions. So yeah, it's a microclimates. Move your plants. I move plants that need more wet, like more moisture and humidity into my bathroom. I'm lucky to have a window in there. All my windows face east. If your plants are on the radiator in the summer and the heat comes on in the winter, no one will recommend that you put your plants on your heater. It's really hot and dry. I will say that I will admit that I do, but I put desert plants on there and I put them on rocks above. They could die. I'm not teaching you to do that. Don't do, it's at your own risk. You would not want to have a spider plant or something more delicate, like an African violet on your radiator. It will fry and die. So yeah, you got to move your plants. And then microclimate is, and I'll do my best definition here. It's like in an area near that's small where the climate is different than it is elsewhere in like the rest of your home, or even if you have a house, maybe a spot near your home is a little warmer and insulated because of the walls, and you can plant a peach tree there where you wouldn't be able to 10 feet away because it would get too much wind and cold. So a microclimate in an apartment is on the radiator. It is hot as heck and really super dry. It's like the Kalahari Desert. There's a space in my bedroom where I have 2 windows, and it's a little bit drafty. And I have this beautiful philodendron, and I noticed it wasn't growing at all. And I was like, well, that's okay. It's winter. But this morning I was looking at this plant, and I was like, I should have moved you into the bathroom a long time ago because it's too cold and too dry here. So I think that plant will do better there, and I hope so. So does that answer your questions?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I would like to thread that another way that we're seeing microclimates and the impact of microclimates or just climates period in the gardens weather-wise, we might check our local, weather forecast to understand what the temperature degree, what the feels like temperature is going to be like for New York City. But what we've been experiencing microclimate-wise, especially during the growing urban agricultural season from April to October, is that we can be getting tremendous flooding rain in the Bronx. And then our colleagues and our fellow gardeners in Brooklyn are sharing with us, share some of that rain because we're struggling with drought. So we're seeing systems where even the weather systems are forming smaller systems that are kind of breaking off and doing their own thing and it can very significantly impact our growing seasons, what we're able to produce, the yield, and more.
Thank you, DK. And if one last note on lights is if you do have low light, if you're facing east, or even you just have less light in the winter and you want to give your plants more light, you can get grow lights. I have a source at the end where you can get them. I just like regular light bulbs that aren't red or blue. I think those look crazy in my house. Other people can advise them. But I prefer, I think these ones work well enough. I don't use a lot of grow lights though. Like just like I don't use a humidifier. I like to keep it simple, but I am going to experiment. But anyway, the grow lights can really help. But the one trick that you should know is that they need to be above the plant. I didn't know that the first time I used it. It's not effective. It's like looking at it. They need to grow up into the light. Yeah, so grow lights. Not much more to say on that. Okay, so a word on water and humidity. All plants need water to survive. They collect the water through the roots. It moves up into the stems and into the air. So it creates moisture. The more plants you have, the more moisture you have around your plants, which can be good for you and also the plants around them. More plants are killed by overwatering than underwatering. I can, that's for sure. I'm bringing it in again, like think of the origin of the plant or the leaf, like I mentioned. Desert plants that have thick waxy leaves need less water. Begonias as well. I've put begonias in my bathroom. They just collapse onto themselves. So lesson learned. It is very humid in my bathroom. And then plants from the tropics need more water. They have thinner leaves, like philodendron, ivy, which can be hard to grow inside. African violets and ferns. Ferns need a lot of moisture and a lot of water. And then you want to consider winter versus summer because it's going to depend on time of year, what's going on outside, and then again, what's going on inside your apartment. Air conditioning versus heating and the dryness, all the things I just said. And ways to produce humidity in your home. So water trays is a kind of like the lo-fi humidifier, and I do use those. Like I use them actually. If you put it on radiators, the water will dissipate more quickly. But what I'd like to do is it's a combination. So the pebble trays, you can put your plants on top of a tray with a lip, or even just the base, the base that the plant pot comes with. If you raise it above sitting on it, but like raise it up a little with some rocks, and you can get small rocks at some plant stores, or you can collect them when you go to the beach next time. And when the water runs through the plant after watering it, or you can just put it at the base, it creates moisture. It evaporates when it evaporates, and that really has been made a big difference for a lot of my plants. And then grouping plants together like this in this photo, that is really good for plants. They can be really happy together. And I have a friend who never got an orchid to reflower. They like humidity, and when she did that, I'm going to try it this year. I'm going to really work on my orchid game. It flowered because it got the humidity that it needed. And she had it for like 5 years, which is amazing. So, and then spraying plants. Now I have one fern, a Boston fern, which is the easiest fern to grow inside. And I do mist it, but I think for the most part, misting plants, it just evaporates, but somehow I really see that it holds on to the fern. But do it if it makes you happy and see what happens. It's houseplant people debate on that. My camera. Wait. Okay. Right. Nice video up. There we go. So you've underwatered your plant. Like again, this is like signs to read and to listen to your plant. This is an extremely dry plant, and it would be tough for this plant to recover from it. In fact, I have one in my office, this exact plant. This is a peace lily. They are kind of dramatic. Like you got to keep your eye on this one, because once it sort of wilts like this, it will come back, but the more times you do it, it stresses the plant and eventually it won't come back. So you want to like pay attention to like the way that leaves curl on themselves a little. And they even start, I think of it as happy sad. It's like a happy plant. It's like buoyant and it's very like it's facing up. It isn't dragging down at all. Like I can tell if a vine plant, like say not a snake plant, a philodendron or a pothos, even if it's starting to get droopy, it's starting to get a little dry, it needs a drink. So you wouldn't want it to get as dried out as this because eventually, like I said, it'll die. So you can give it some water as soon as it's starting to get droopy, so and wilting. It's dry. If there's brown edges on the leaves, that can also indicate too much light as well. Too much sunshine can burn it. The leaves can turn yellow and they get dry and crispy. So you need to water it. More plants are killed by overwatering. I know I've done this. I used to think I couldn't grow succulents. It's because I was watering them too much. So the soil is too soggy or wet, the plant is drooping. I know that's the same thing as underwatering, so that's tricky, but it just looks a little different, like the plant's almost mushy. Cactus, if you water it and then it kind of can rest on its side. It's kind of funny. They look like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but sometimes even more. If you were to try and repot it, the roots will be brown and soft. They're rotting, it's root rot. So I would say it's easier to bring back a plant from underwatering than overwatering. So err on the side of too little. Don't leave your plant in water. Like you can like water it from the bottom of the pot, like if it's in a tray, but don't let it sit more than 30 minutes. Because you want to prevent root rot. Wait until soil is dry to the touch. There are like tools that you can stick in your plant. I don't use those. I usually like to stick my finger in or I pick up my pot. So pick up your pots and if it's when it's really dry and see how it feels when it's really light and then what it feels like when it's watered. And that can be really helpful. Also, I just want to say, since a lot of people kill succulents and like I did. So if you really love to water your plants and dote on them, consider not getting succulents. Know yourself too.
Zoe, I want to share that I think how I feel about succulents is that, you and I have had this conversation twofold. If you are going to grow succulents, they do really well closer to a heat source. So we're certainly not recommending that you put your plants on a radiator, but just consider that that heat source is a great source for succulents. So maybe the closer they are to a radiator, but Zoe and I have talked about the Northeast isn't really the region for succulents. So I always wonder if maybe it's just a marketing ploy because they're so small, they don't take up a lot of space and they're so cute. Maybe that's kind of why they're pushed,
They're very
and sold,
collectible.
which is very deceiving. But Christina shares that I clean offices, and for the life of me, I cannot figure out why people always try to grow peace lilies in offices. Christina, you are right on point with that because I don't get it either. Maybe it's convenience. Maybe they think it looks pretty. I'm not really sure. So we'll put that in the succulents category too.
That's funny. There are certain house plants that you see are plants, indoor plants that you see all the time in offices. And before I started working here and I worked in an office, there were signs I was coming to a career change. I would talk to the person who came every week to water the plants, and I kind of wanted her job. And I would talk to her because a lot of these plants, they were not thriving. Let's put it that way. They did not have what they needed to thrive. Um, and they would drop leaves, and what they do is they replace them, and it's they're sort of like they hang on for a few months, and that's not what we want in our home. So yeah, and yeah, peace lilies are nice though, and people love them, and yes, you got to keep your eye on them. I've had one and it did really well and reflowered, and then finally it did die. I might try again. Anyway, getting back to the things you need to have your plants thrive. Okay, so potting soil and amendments. So you want a good potting soil, and you can buy them at hardware stores. You can buy it at plant stores. Order it online. I think I don't have a particular brand. I'm not fussy about it, but I do know that a potting soil some of the potting soils, they use the word soil. There's no soil in there. They call it a growing medium. You can use soil or you can use a growing medium, but you want to make sure it's well draining and it also retains moisture at the same time and the right amount, as I discussed earlier. Common mixes can include sterile soil because you don't want discouraging fungal growth, which isn't the end of the world as far as I'm concerned. I've done it, but it can interrupt or kill your plants. So generally, you don't want to have soil from outside. Of course, I've talked to community gardeners who do it and it works for them. And if it's working for you, carry on. But I can't, it's not recommended. So I'm going to talk about amendments, and one amendment in particular that I'd like you not to use and to use if you want to take care of the environment. So I don't normally like say, oh, you get this kind of soil mixture because I amend them. However, if you are potting up any kind of succulent cacti euphorbia situation, get a succulent mixture. It's a good place to start. A regular soil mix is going to be too wet and it will make your plant just not grow. It will die. Don't do that. Also epiphyte, which just simply means a plant that doesn't grow in soil, like orchids. It grows like on the side of a tree. So it sort of has roots. It does have roots. The roots connect to the tree and pulls moisture and minerals and nutrients from the air. Because if you think of an orchids growing in a place with underneath the canopy with lots of plants going on and lots of moisture in the air, it's the air that has the moisture and the nutrients, not the soil. So you want to get an orchid mixture, which is like bark, moss, and charcoal. Because again, you can't grow an orchid in a soil, it will die. So a normal soil mixture can be some kind of like soil substrate or soil, and then usually peat moss and perlite. And there are many. I have a few listed here, but there are more amendments. The ones that I was taught to use and that I use most often, although I'm experimenting a little more, were peat moss and perlite. So perlite is it's like this white, it looks kind of like teeny tiny bits of styrofoam. It's not. It's a volcanic rock that is treated, it's heated and it gets the texture that it does. And when you add that, it keeps the soil aerated. You don't want it to be a soil to be too dense. You want to make sure that air and water can run through your soil. And perlite's really great for that. And then peat moss is a fibrous material. It's great. It's great. It holds on to water. It kind of does two things that seem counterintuitive that they do it at once. It holds on to water and it also makes sure that the soil isn't too wet. Because it holds on to it, the moisture is there and the soil will pull from it when it needs it, but it doesn't make the soil muddy. I hope that makes sense. There are other things, however, and I'll talk about why we want to use other things in peat moss in the next slide, but coconut coir does the same things as peat moss, but it's a renewable resource. So that is, coconut coir is like a shredded material from coconut husks that grow so abundantly and they're shredded. It's inexpensive and it's great. So that's what I'm using now instead of peat moss. And I try to buy soil mixes that would have that in it instead of peat moss. And I'll talk about a little bit more about that in the next slide. Vermiculite also retains water, bark, if you want to make sure your plant, like some people, they put sort of bark and orchid mixes in with plants like Monstera deliciosa, because I think there's a trend right now to really experimenting and adjusting your soil mixture. Hence, I'm including all these, but I don't know that it's so necessary. Lava rock, I've never used it, but I've read about it. It's permeable, holds on to water. It's good for succulents and cacti, as is sand, which I have been using. Just because I got it at work, and when I'm repotting succulents, I throw that in there. Here's what peat moss is, and you can see it's sold widely. I don't have a picture of coconut coir, but it's also sold widely. You can order it online. So peat moss, it grows in like more northern climates like Scotland and places like that. And it's called sphagnum moss. It grows very, very slowly. And I think for a long time, people didn't really know what to do with it. When it gets dried up in bogs, it creates anaerobic environments. It's really dense. And it was used to like heat their people's homes. And it gets harvested for houseplants. However, it is not a renewable resource. And what has been, because once you take it, it takes a long time for it to grow. And it, over time, we have these bogs that have so much of this dried material. But like I said, if it takes a long time to grow, it takes a long time to accumulate. And what people realize, scientists, recently, is that these bogs and the do is they hold on to so much carbon, and that's what we need. In fact, peat moss bogs hold on to more carbon on the planet than all of the forests combined, which I thought was kind of amazing and blew my mind because I've never seen a peat moss bog. I think maybe once in Wisconsin, but they're not really around here. We don't see them so much, but they're really important. And it's a great material, but I recommend using coconut coir. And it's wonderful stuff. So that's something I would say that's an environmental impact, like on houseplants. In fact, in England and the UK, I think it was in 2023, they banned using it in houseplant mixtures. They don't use it anymore. So another is a thing you might, when you want to add, and it's generally advised to use every 3 months, but not in the winter months, are plant food fertilizers. I have a picture of one here. There are many of them. And this works well. And you're not, this isn't stuff for eating unless you're growing herbs in your side. So if you want to use, I kind of like organic things better, but if you want to use, it's not good for the environment to in your soil outside to use, any kind of more chemical synthetic fertilizers. They're heavy in the nitrogen, it gets into the water, it's not good for the environment. So I recommend you can throw into your, if you have compost, you can throw that into your houseplant mixture. You can either make it with worms in your apartment, maybe you can get it from a community garden, you can order it online, you can get it at farmers markets, they sometimes sell it, and it's a really great addition to add to your soil plant, your houseplant mixtures. It's high in nitrogen, which is great for leaf growth and having green leaves, and then phosphorus and potassium. And it degrades slowly, so you don't need to add it all the time. Sometimes I like to top my plants with worm compost. However, don't add so much to your desert plants, your succulents. And worm compost tends, at least the one that I make, tends to be wetter. Although I'm working on why that is. So I also would not top any desert plant with that. But I do add it to my other plants, and it makes them really happy, and they grow more leaves and they get really green. Okay, we're not at the end though. I'm going to go back and talk about one more thing that has to do with, that's a very important issue with houseplants and climate change, and that's these succulents. As you noted, they sell them so much as everything comes into fashion or has trends, and plants and houseplants are no different. And these plants are really, really, really popular right now. And they've gotten, houseplants and gardening has gotten really popular since the pandemic. One of the impacts, and not just the United States, but worldwide, is on these succulents from this part of the world in particular. I'm sure elsewhere, and also certain plants in jungle, more jungly and like areas, and more tropical plants. But these plants have a special, like there's a lot of problems, like especially I think the Asian market really is crazy for them. And like I said, 40% of succulents come from here, and they have people go and they illegally pick them and bring them back. And some plants have been brought to like near extinction in the past like 5 years because they've been over harvested. So it's something I would want you to consider, that these little plants are in our homes. We might not think about them and connected to the bigger world and the bigger like issues of climate and all of the things with plants. They sort of become really removed from their natural environment, right? but they're not. So we want to think about where they're coming from and where they're sourced from when we're getting them. Most places, I think, are getting plants, like if you go to a nursery or you go to Home Depot or go to your farmer's market, these plants are not from any of those places. If you're shopping on Etsy, you can ask, especially if they're a more rare plant. All of these these rare house plants, they can be propagated, and they are, and they can be grown from the seed, and they are. So you can get these things that are in a way that's like not going to harm or be unethical, or make any plant extinct. But it's just something to be aware of, that that's happening, and it's been happening in larger, with succulents anyway. I think they're really fashionable. And another way you can tell is, I think it's some people who are houseplant people go like to collect, like they're art collectors almost. And so some of those plants that are really rare and endangered, I think, are very expensive. I don't know where they sell these. I'm kind of looking into it, but I just want you to consider that. Like, just think about, what you might even want to ask you where you get your plants, where they're getting them from. So that's that.
Zoe, you're doing really great on time.
Oh, good.
You're at the 7 o'clock mark. Can
Great.
you go a little bit more in depth about using compost for your houseplants? And very specifically, maybe some other kind of amendments that you might use. I'm curious to know. Sometimes I actually use the water left over from my sea moss from my houseplants. And it's akin to me to like Neptune's fertilizer, a fish fertilizer that we use in the gardens. Can you talk a little bit more about compost for houseplants? Because
Absolutely.
we know that if you use a little bit too much compost, it can burn, and some other amendments. And then also, I want to encourage our attendees, please shout out in the chat, other tips that you have been doing that you would like to share with our group that have contributed to either the success or failure of your houseplants. Zoe?
Yeah. So with compost, I would, if you're adding it, and I didn't talk soil mixture, how much. So for the peat moss or coconut coir and perlite, you just want to use, and I don't have a recipe here, but I would say like 10% could be peat moss or coconut coir. Sorry, not the peat moss. I'm not advising that, and perlite. And the compost, really like 5%, a small amount, and really mix it in. Now, what is the most, I think for houseplants, the most important macronutrient? There's a lot of micro and macronutrients in compost, though, more than you'll get in a synthetic fertilizer. It just helps with the leaf growth and keeps the roots strong. And compost has a lot of that, as does an amendment, like you mentioned, the water from sea moss. That sounds so interesting. I want to hear more about that, DK, and how you have sea moss in your house, because I want that. Is this Neptune fish spray? I haven't used it yet in my apartment, but I want to. But I want to do it when it's warm out and I can have all the windows open, because it does have a smell. It dissipates after a day. So I would like do it in the morning, come to work. We use it, like they use it at the New York Botanical Garden, and they'll do it on a Monday when we're closed, because it will smell like fish, but it's amazing. It has so much good stuff in it. Other amendments and how they work. I mean, I think it's intuitive, but I do it a lot. So sand, why would sand be a great thing to add? It's really large. You can see it. It's not microscopic, where some soil particles are so small you'd really have to look under magnifying glass to see them. Sand you can see, so you have a lot of aeration. It makes the water go through. You don't want too much. You want some water, but like, you think of a desert, it's got some sand in there, or any plant that grows near the ocean. And that keeps the water moving so that you don't have too much moisture. I will share that I had a houseplant class, and someone a couple months ago, and someone so sweetly brought me some plants that she had propagated. It was a succulent. Does anyone know mother of millions or mother of thousands in that plant? Yes, I see Patricia. One of my favorites. It's amazing because each leaf has like many, I've never counted, like it almost seems like 50 on each leaf, like 50 baby plants. The moment they hit soil, they will start growing. Yep, that's it. Can you see Patricia there? Everyone, I don't know. So what she did though is, if you can see me, she potted them in this it was a teeny plant, maybe the size of my pinky nail, in a pot this size. And it was too big. If your plant's in a pot that's too big, all that extra soil around it holds on to the water. There's something to think about. She didn't know. It's such a nice thought. We're all learning all the time. So yeah, so I want to make some more plants for her. So sand is great that way. Lava rock also will give a lot of porosity, and it doesn't hold on to the water. And that's also great for succulents and cacti. Bark also, big chunky pieces. I mean, that's what you want in a mixture for, like, this is an orchid. I'm going to try and get to reflower. I mean, all of this, as you can see, it's just big pieces of bark, and I don't even know what, actually, I don't know what all this stuff is. I'm not going to make things up, but there's a lot of space for air in here. So. And what else? What else did you ask me, DK? Or anyone else?
I do want to uplift, you are 100% right. If you're going to try Neptune's fish fertilizer, a little bit goes a long way, especially if you're using for houseplants. And it can be fishy and smelly, which is natural. So you definitely want to use just a little bit, add it to your water, and then have your windows open.
I love that Patricia brought a houseplant to share. Does anyone else have anything? Don't be shy. I mean, I have many.
Thank you, Patricia.
Oh, hi, Jude. You got a raised hand. What's up?
Hi, Jude.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Yeah, there's when I went to this other meeting, and it was based on aquascaping for fish tanks, and it's I forgot her name, but she's like a champion of around the world, all over the world. And she was speaking, and it was like there's so much connection with what you are talking about as far as um how to organize escaping inside the fish tank, but I was like certain tips that she was saying, like um, making sure that you have certain tools, like basically the peer light and stuff like, certain things that you have available because you have no idea what plants you will get, and basically be able to have to organize and have a storage of things that you can mix and match. So you could organize your plants. When you get a new plant as it grow, you want to have materials instead of having to run to Home Depot and the last minute and delay your time to repot them. Also another thing was thinking about getting learning to master one thing at a time. I know when we get like a group of plants or we start to bring in succulents and stuff like that, you want to do it all, but it's like learn to master just getting the water retention right, the soil mixture. Um, all of it takes time, and just having extra material, taking time to master things, and start to think about each plant is part of a whole composition. So it's not just that one plant. If you most likely you're going to be planning to get more, and how does everything about just living space? How does that work as far as the whole composition of different plants? So start to design how to create like a what you call like a sandbox. So may take like shoebox and just create a sample of like how you want things arranged. We would use a tank, but um, you can use a shoe box and basically makes that arrangement as part of your planning of how you want things arranged. That's all I have to say.
Mhm. Thanks, Jude.
Thank you so much for that, Jude. You bring up some really interesting points. And one of those points, Zoe, that I would love for you to expand on. Jude mentions that it's not only important to plan, but it brings to mind that it's important to manage our time and how much time we can actually dedicate to taking care of our plants so that they'll thrive. Can you talk about the importance of pruning,
Oh,
removing dead leaves,
yeah.
and really just being in touch with our plant systems? Sometimes there's I don't know, I guess a mis idea for folks who, not all folks, but some folks who grow plants, that they can just, it'll take care of itself. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Similar to growing gardens, you know, what we put our energy into grows. And it's important to understand that we have to give our houseplants that same amount of love and attention as we would in a garden. So, can you talk to the importance of pruning and some other practices that, besides watering, besides light, besides soil care, what are just some other general practices that you would want to recommend when it comes to taking care of our plants?
A great question. So, you do want to prune your plants. So, of any kind of dead leaves, you want to cut them off. And I recommend doing it. I used to use a scissor, and I was like, I'm not going to get any fancy garden supplies. This was a few years ago. I now have a really nice pruner, and because a sharp cut is much better for the plant. Just use a sharp scissor if that's what you got, but you want to cut it kind of like at a 90-degree angle, and the words, but like kind of close to a node or to the main stem so that you don't damage it. And what that does, if you have a plant that, a leaf that's getting yellow or is dead, is it allows the energy to go more into the roots, into the growth of new leaves, and for it to flower if it's a flowering plant. So I recommend that highly. Some plants that are creepers, like this one, it's called an inch plant. If you can see it, I hope. Uh, I give this to people for cuttings all the time. It is something that grows along, it goes in nature and in its wild habitat. It will grow along the ground and plant more of itself. So something like that, or a vine like a pothos, which grows, it's a long skinny vine that grows up a tree. In a house plant situation, it will get long and stringy, and it might even lose leaves at the top and only have leaves at the bottom, and you might not like the way that looks, and it might not grow as well. So I think cutting it back so that it can grow more is important. And when I say cut back, it's like giving it a haircut. Okay. And then I didn't touch on propagation, and different plants can be propagated differently. And I'm not going to get too detailed into it, but like a lot of plants, if you stick that, not the dead leaves, but like if you're cutting back, like say a pothos or many philodendron, and you have a node, which is a little bump on the plant, and you put it in water, and you leave it there, you will get some roots that you can plant. So it's just like free plants, and you can make more of them, which is always fun. I just pruned a pothos type of plant that I can't believe how much it's growing, and I'm gonna have some more. That's all. The moral of that story. But anyway, it's super fun to do, and then you'll have many more plants. I feel like, what else can you do for care? You want to make sure your leaves are clean. I don't mention this enough. I don't think they sell like this house plant cleaner, leaf spray. You don't need that. Paper towel or a rag, and just damp it and like wash the leaves off, because they don't photosynthesize as well if they're covered in dust. Also, your windows. I'm not saying I've done that, but if your windows are clean, it makes a big difference to how much light can get in. Also, I have one friend in New York, but this is more of like a thing they do in states like Florida, where you get so much light, they can put a UV coating on your windows. In case anyone has it, I don't know, that's too bad for your houseplants. It will preserve the fabric in your interior, but your houseplants won't get as much light. Like my friend, her plants aren't doing well. She wants my help, and I'm like, oh boy, I don't know. I have to look into it. But maybe grow lights is what I've the little research I've done will help her. But most of us don't have that, fortunately, in New York. So yeah, you want it, but a clean window, clean leaves helps the plants get the light that they need. So also for your plants, I would say repot them every couple of years or so. Like pay attention to see if you're watering your plant and the water runs right through, it's probably root bound. And then it's kind of strangling itself. It won't only not grow, I mean, but it will eventually die. They don't like that. And when you do repot it, like I was saying about something being in a pot that's too big and having too much soil around it, only size up a little, like a couple inches more at most.
Thank
So
you for
that's
that.
important. That's important. Yeah, that's all I can think of. Yeah.
Those are great. We're at the 7:15 mark, and we do have a question in the chat regarding pests. Christina says, I have been struggling with mealybug and scale on some of my orchids. I have been pretty much hitting it with everything, wiping the leaves with alcohol, insecticidal soap, neem oil, and even systemic poison. Any other suggestions?
Well, first of all, I hope you've sort of separated them from your other plants. I don't have, I'm like, I want you to email me because I know someone I can ask here at work. I don't have another, everything you've done is what I would say. When I get insects on my plants, I separate them and I hope for the best. Sometimes I get like gnats if my soil is too wet, and I use like a sort of sticker thing and it collects them, and that I have mastered. But what you're describing, and if you've done all those things, I'm not sure what else you can do. I'm curious what kind of soil you have them planted in. Like, is they're getting too much moisture? But anyway, if you could take my email down and write to me, I would love that. I'm actually going to be seeing the curator here of orchids, and he does know more about orchids than me. And I can ask him that. I love asking him questions. I learned
Christina,
so much.
I'm so glad that you shared your next comment because it's actually what I was about to share. And Christina shares that I put all of my plants outside in the summer and all of the pests go away. And I'm glad that you said that because I wanted to share that because we are just living in unprecedented climate times that are in fact, impacting our houseplants. The reality is that sometimes it is time to take stock to understand if our houseplant has actually outgrown its environment. And sometimes that answer is yes. Just like we, have our starts in greenhouses on the lands and then we bring them outside to harden off, to test and see, are they ready to be outside? Are they ready to be in the beds? I think we're at a point where the same can be said for houseplants. I think it's important to evaluate that as time changes, systems change, as things are hybrid and breeding together and just so many factors. Sometimes it could be that even the house plant has outgrown an environment, and it really is something to consider if changing the environment, not just room to room, but maybe transitioning that plant to be outdoors is actually what it needs. Thank you, Mel, for contributing to please quarantine and spray with pressurized water to get them off the plant. That's a really great
That's a
idea.
good idea.
And then Mel also says, assess the environment to see what context is lending to this potential cause. That's a really great idea as well. This is particularly important, Mel. I think that if you've introduced a new plant into your home environment, and with that, it's really important that you trust where you're bringing your source, where you're bringing your plants from, where you're bringing your cuttings from. Please always use, a vendor or a source that you trust, that you've researched, that are growing things ethically, that are growing things, with proper and safe materials, because you never know what you could be introducing into your home environment.
Yeah, and also I'll say, like, when you buy your plants at big box stores, which I'm not a snob. IKEA, I read, like, gets all their plants locally. But because they're such a big box store, the staff isn't really, might not know how to take care of them so well, even at a Home Depot. And they might not have time to, and diseases can spread, and they might not be in the best shape. And then it's like you could bring home something. So just like look at the plant when you get it and see how healthy it is and try and get a sense. And then you don't want to bring insects or pests. Like look.
Mm-hmm. Everybody, we thank you so much for joining us for this workshop. At this point, we are at the 7:20 mark, and we encourage you, if you have any additional questions for our remaining few minutes, please feel free to continue to drop your questions and comments in the chat. But also at this time, feel free to unmute if you've heard something tonight, or if you have an additional comment or resource that you would like to share with our group. Please remember that this is being recorded, and it will be featured on both the GreenThumb and NYRP YouTube pages. Give it a few days for us to make some edits and properly get them up on our sites. And we just want to thank you so much for coming. This is the last in our climate change series as a collaborating partner between GreenThumb and NYRP, but it certainly isn't the last time we'll be collaborating this season. We do also have our Seaweed City virtual that we did that talked about water systems on both of our YouTube pages on our sites. And Zoe, right, if you will keep up your contact slides so that the good folks will know how to get in contact with you. We want to thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We want to thank y'all so much for coming, because we do recognize you could be anywhere and you chose to be here. And at this time, I would like to encourage any last comments or questions in the chat or unmute. And then after that, I would encourage Fabiola to please close us out.
Thank you, DK. Well, the same. Thank you very much for being here tonight. I'll be following up with an email with a link of our YouTube channel and this recording. And same with any other recordings from New York Restoration Project and the Botanical Garden. Thank you. Mahira?
Thank you all for coming. I love houseplants and talking about them, and I always learn something from people in the class who did tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. You're getting a lot of love in the chat. Everybody's saying that they're excited to be here. Thank you for all of the great information. Mel shouts out, I just want to shout out heated mats. Oh, I didn't think of that, Mel. Heated mats, because I've seen firsthand how awesome they aid in indoor plant growth, especially with all of the cold that this winter has brought. And then Zoe, you continue to get more love in the chat. We have somebody that said, thank you, so very informative, which it was. You're always so informative, and we really appreciate the time that you spent with us tonight.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And thank you for that tip. That might be what my philodendron in my bedroom needs.
Mm-hmm. Could be.
Bathroom doesn't do it. I'll consider that.
It's cool.
Christina, I see that you've unmuted. Please feel free to take the mic.
Oh, thank you very much. I just appreciate everyone's information. I use the heated mats to start my tomato plants.
Oh,
From
wow.
seed. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. Mel, you got an endorsement.
Go tomatoes, go indoor tomatoes.
I know. Go heated mats. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that.
Thank you, Zoe. This was awesome.
Thank you so much
Joshua.
for coming.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. And just a reminder that this video will be up on the NYRP YouTube page as well as the GreenThumb page. And you can contact Zoe at her email address here for any additional information, any questions. And then also shout out Zoe to Bronx Green-Up, great organization for lending you to us tonight.
Oh.
Everybody, please check out Bronx Green-Up's Instagram for all of the wonderful programs that they facilitate year-round, hybrid, in person, and virtually. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Stay warm, stay growing, stay happy, and we'll see you in the gardens this season. Thank you and have a great night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye,
Good night. What are your
Bye-bye.
plants?
Water your plants. Thank you so much. Bye.